Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Taylor Rockwell. Daryl Grove is not with me. He remains in England, presumably sipping tea and mourning the loss of the Empire. So instead of Daryl, we've got American Soccer Now's Brian Sciaretta. He was here to discuss the decreased importance of dual national players, the difficulty of bringing new faces into an already crowded camp, and what player could have the biggest impact on the U.S. men's national team in the near future. Hint, he's already in Major League Soccer. So, without further rambling, here's Brian. On the line with me now, I've got Brian Sciaretta, the lead writer for American Soccer Now, occasional contributor to the New York Times. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, anytime.
So, are you in the D.C. area? Is that correct, or have you moved elsewhere since last we spoke?
Oh no, I'm back home in New Jersey.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, I think maybe last time you were in D.C., so I was just wondering if you were talking to me to avoid traffic.
Yeah, I went to college at Georgetown.
There we go.
So,
okay,
I have a lot of D.C. in my blood.
Gotcha. Well, I wanted to talk to you today because we've had you on in the past. I would say that you are, in my mind, like the man who knows the most about up-and-coming U.S. players and players abroad and dual nationals. It seems like you kind of have your finger on the pulse. Would you say that's your specialty, or is that just something that like you just happen to be very good at occasionally?
I used to do it a lot more than a little bit more. When I first got started, that was kind of always a fascination with me. Mm-hmm. But as it comes and goes, you always knew, the aggressive hunt for dual nationals is more of a Band-Aid than anything else. It's never going to substitute your own development and everything. So it was kind of cool when these guys were popping up regularly, but you knew it wasn't going to last at that kind of frequency. With all kinds of reasons going into that too. I mean, the bases were the military bases and throughout most of Europe have been declining in size, and as we all know, that was a huge source for a lot of these dual nationals. So, it was, they're always going to pop up, but they're definitely, not popping up as much as they used to, mm-hmm. and I think that's probably a healthy thing, actually.
Actually, since you brought it up, I wanted to ask, we had a question about this a long time ago, and I think Daryl and I kind of stumbled our way through it. So I'm curious if you have any insight. It was basically, the U.S., as you said, has military bases everywhere. It seems like the military bases in in Germany tend to be the ones that produce these players, whereas in other countries, specifically Japan, you don't get a lot of dual national eligible soccer players. Do you think that's because there are just other sports that maybe people gravitate towards in Japan, or are there other reasons, do you think, why there aren't dual nationals coming out?
Yeah, I mean, it could very well be that. I mean, I think it's, if you look at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany, it's right it's right where, there's some great development in that area. Mm-hmm. And Japan just doesn't have the football. I mean, their footballing culture is really not any superior to ours. So the chances are that you're going to come across a guy who walks into like some kind of great Japanese developmental mm-hmm. system over there is small. Whereas in Germany, the chances are that they could walk into, a Frankfurt or Eintracht Frankfurt or Bayern Munich or something along that is obviously much higher.
There we are. Well, so when I contacted you, I wanted to talk to you about some dual nationals, maybe coming through the pipeline, get your thoughts on them. And you, I'll say, first of all, politely said, sure, I can do that, which I did appreciate. And then your second response was, it's a dying topic, though. There aren't as many dual nationals.
Well, no, I mean, it's still very relevant because you still have guys like, Kevin Carter-Vickers is pushing up through the system. I mean, Gideon Zelalem is mixed signals.
Is existing?
Yeah, he could go either way, and they're still under 20 players, and their connection to the U.S. is always mixed. And look, they're always going to pop up, but in terms of the reliance of them, the chances, as the U.S. gets better, in their own domestic front, mm-hmm. The chances are that some guy at random overseas is going to be better than the homegrown products that we have here. Is always just going to be smaller. Now, if you were to take these group of players that aren't as good for the U.S. and you were to go back and compare them with American players in the 70s and 80s, they'd be much better than the American player. But as we've gotten better here in this country domestically and what we can build with our own two hands, so to speak, the reliance on them is little. And what I like to say is like, listen, I've been around a long time, and I remember when Savatic left the program, when Rossi left the program, and it was huge. Rossi, he never really left the program. He never was part of it.
Right.
But, it's like when other countries lose a star player that's a dual national, they just move on because they're more focused on the pipeline. I mean, an individual player here and there is nothing compared to your own developmental system. I mean, it's like, for example, Croatia, when they found out Christian Pulisic had a Croatian passport, of course they asked him. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to be foolish not to. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world that was born in his in 98. He's one of the best players in the world. That's a 98. So Croatia asked. He said no, I want to play for the U.S. And then you don't see Croatia like all up and going crazy about like like to the level of when Rossi. It wasn't. They didn't consider it a loss. I mean, they just said, okay, that's fine. We want people who want to play with us, and you don't see people calling for people to be fired and everything. And I don't think if Cameron Carter-Vickers turns out to be one of the best defenders in the Premier League, I mean, I don't think England's going to be all up and they're not going to go crazy about it because they always know that if they develop, if their pipeline is good, their youth development is good, which right now it's questionable, but if they can focus on that, there's going to be another Cameron Carter-Vickers coming through the system, right around the bend. He's not like Lionel Messi, which is like a once-in-a-generation kind of a thing.
See, that really is fascinating to me because I think my approach to dual nationals has been like, oh, it's unearthing, diamonds in the rough, and here's a potential gem, and it's like kind of an exciting scavenger hunt.
Yeah,
almost.
Because they're exciting. You can see a guy get when you see a guy like attached to like a big club, you think like,
exactly.
Wow. Yeah, but the thing about it is like a big club. Look, they have, let's say for example in Germany, you have U23s, U19s, U17. Sometimes you have a U18, which is like a reserve team for the U19 team. So you have like a lot of youth. They're not all prospects. I mean, I like to use the phrase organizational soldier or organizational fodder. They're there to make up numbers. I mean, they have their prospects even at Dortmund, Bayern Munich. They have their prospects and they have their guys that are just there so they can fill up like the 6 or 7 youth teams that they have to fill up. So you have to kind of know whether or not, okay, he's with Bayern Munich. You have to of course you do your research, and then you find out, like I said, Timothy Tillman's going to be pretty good. It looks like at Bayern Munich, but he's playing for Germany, which is fine. I mean, he has an American passport, but big deal. I mean, he didn't really born and raised. I mean, it's like, of course, Christian Pulisic is going to want to play for the United States. Of course, Timothy Tillman is going to want to play for Germany.
Yeah,
it's just and it's just the way it is. You always got to do diligence, like I said, like Croatia did with him. But it was a stopgap feature for a while, and I still think they're always going to be looking for him. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like the emphasis that they're going to be placed on the program, like I really don't. It's not going to match what it was. I would say like in 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't look like those kind of numbers are going to be there. And then of course Klinsmann in his last 2 years as a head coach. And I think in 2 years the program's going to look very different. So. It's just a lot. Like I said, you got to wait for them to stump. You do your research. You always do your research, but we'll see where some of them will bet, and maybe you find another Cameron Carter-Vickers. That's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities.
So then let me flip it around then. And first of all, I wanted to say for any of you indie bands out there looking for a name, Brian just gave you one. It's Organizational Fodder. That's amazing. Second of all, I wanted to say then, like, so what if you flip it around? And if like the United States continues to develop and become a stronger soccer nation, do you think the country is looking at potential dual nationals coming out of the United States like Christian Pulisic, as you mentioned, like maybe Jesse Gonzalez? Do you think the United States starts to get scouted a little more aggressively, or is that already happening?
Well, they are. I mean, like any kind of American with like an El Salvadorian passport. I mean, El Salvador's all over it. Like, for example, like Junior Flores was a great example of like a guy who signed on with a big club, and then he was a non-factor for the 17s, and he was cut by the 20s, and that certainly doesn't look like it was the wrong decision by Tab Ramos for the 2015 U20 World Cup, and then he was not even a factor at all for the U23 team. And, it really, and who knows whether or not even he's ever going to find some, at the MLS level. But, El Salvador was looking around for him. I mean, I think he might, in all fairness, if you were going to take a step back from it and be a neutral about it, his best move is probably to file a switch and play for El Salvador. I mean, I can't see him playing for the United States. I don't. I mean, why wouldn't he want to go play for someplace that somebody that wants him? So yeah, you're going to lose, or the U.S. will probably lose a lot more players at the back end. I think what's going to be very, very painful, if it ever happens, is if the U.S. has a player that was born and raised here, develops domestically, therefore, comes up to an MLS team and then makes a move abroad, and then the U.S. loses him.
Right.
Or, whether or not maybe they come in and recruit an MLS player who's doing very, very well, but that the U.S. loses a player that it really wants just because it didn't rate him. Like Sabatic, I mean, I was very close to the situation. He was always going to play for Serbia. That was in the cards. He started refusing U.S. call-ups. Rongin actually wanted him on that U20 team. He wasn't cut. But he just was looking for any kind of excuse, so he found some, mildly critical comment that Rongin made and just used that as, I'm leaving here, because he was looking for any kind of way just to pass the blame on somebody else to leave. Rossi was always honest. He never wanted to play for these teams. But I think it's going to be very painful when, if there's going to be, some player, that the U.S. has within its grasp, always could have had, didn't rate, and then some other team comes in and swoops up and gets them. That's going to be the one you want to avoid. But, if they lose a guy like Junior Flores, or, the guys, that the U.S. doesn't really need or want, like Tony Chani, they actually had him on the U.S. call-up. And then he left for Cameroon, I believe it was. That's just, you can't make room for everybody. So you just got to say, you shake their hand and wish them the best.
Well, then let me ask you this as well, then, because I want to make sure that I have a good idea of how it works. So it seems to me from the U.S. perspective that Klinsmann either has scouts out there or is just kind of constantly talking to people in the know, watching games, figuring this stuff out. So first of all, is that correct? And second of all, does it go the opposite way? Does Germany have scouts in Turkey looking at potential Turkish players that could play for Germany? Or is this more of a U.S. and maybe middle to smaller nations looking for talent elsewhere?
I don't think Germany has scouts in Turkey. I think that they've had dual nationals play for Germany and do very well. And it's not just Turks. I mean, Miroslav Klose. Germany has done the same, but at the same point, they don't really. I mean, for it to be the status of Germany, they have to be someone that they're interested in. Chances are they're going to either come through the Bundesliga. There's no reason to think that there's going to be a dual national for Germany. That's really that they're going to miss. Outside their own borders. I mean, look, Jonathan Spector is a German American. He was different because he was born and raised in Chicago. But when he got his start for his professional career, his first appearance was for Manchester United in the Community Shield. He ended up starting Champions League qualifiers for Manchester United. Now, no one knew he would come back to earth, but even Germany back then was not interested. I mean, they didn't come up to Spector and be like, "Wow, you're on a very big club." They just don't do that. I mean, and they know that, look, obviously, if Miroslav Klose was it was in their grasp. Obviously, that would have been a loss for Germany. But at the same point, this is Germany. They're not going to beg. They're not going to, actively recruit. They're going to think the German national team sells itself. It's such an unbelievable brand in worldwide soccer. If someone doesn't even want to actively go out there and try as hard as they can to play for it, then it's not the kind of person you want. Look, international play is different than club play. Club play is for hire. National team is, there's games you got to really want it. If you go watch a World Cup game or European Championship game, emotion carries you a long way in these tournaments, where more so than a club team. For example, if international teams played 80-something games a year, Wales or Iceland would come back down to earth. But if you put them in a small, short tournament where there's 3 games, they can really rally together and pull off something special. And they really pull off something special really because there is a camaraderie among there. And, and they don't, and they just, and I think that's tough to come by, because you're not going to get, if a guy's not born and raised in Iceland playing for Iceland, I don't think that they could pull off those kind of upsets if they rely heavily on like people that are not from Iceland, because I think that camaraderie and feeling took them a long way. Same thing with Wales at the European European Championship.
So in your opinion, then, how is the camaraderie with that U.S. national team, like, group? I won't even say, like, the team is itself, because I know that can be
among the guys not born and raised?
Well, yeah, I mean, so, like, say you have, like, a German-American who's now playing for the U.S. national team coming into his first camp or a second camp or whatever. Like, do you think it is a very welcoming atmosphere because there is that kind of now tradition of dual nationals, or can it be a little bit intimidating?
Yeah, but, if you have, like, half the team is dual nationals, then the culture is a little bit lost. I mean, I think if it's mostly American and there's one or two dual nationals coming in, I think it's fine. It's no problem. But, if you start having, like, all, like, guys, like, a big, huge percentage of the team, like I said, like, most of the German Americans aren't really part of the team anymore. I mean, regularly. Chandler's on and off again. Danny Williams is on and off again. Julian Green's on and off again. I mean, the guys who are really only part of it consistently are Brooks and Johnson, I think. Boyd isn't really part of it as much. But like I said, when you, it's very welcoming. But on top of that, there's also, a level of an extra level of due diligence you have to do for a player who's born here. But not born, like I say, not born here. I mean, born and raised here. Yeah. You have to look in to see whether or not they're in it for the right reasons, or whether or not they're in it because, like, it's just something to do. It's a resume booster, because look, international play helps players get contracts. You can sell yourself as a U.S. international. It's going to open some doors. But yeah, it takes like a whole nother level of due diligence to find out whether or not they're here the right way. I mean, you can get a guy like Terrence Boyd, who, it's funny, is because he's not born and raised here, and his connection is like, yeah, his dad was a soldier and served his country, but he hates his dad. He doesn't even talk to him. He talks a little bit to his dad's family, but for him to get his American passport, he had to kind of try to track things through his family, but he refused to talk to his father. But he still really wants to be part of the U.S. program. But then it's not always the case. I mean, Chandler was not part of the U.S. team because of commitment issues for a long time too. And I think that also the reason why, you could say like he's not very popular among U.S. fans is because his club performances never really matched the international performances. I mean, it would be an interesting question to ask a lot of American fans if they would be comfortable sending Chandler out there to start against Mexico. On November 11th. I mean, do you think that this is a guy you really want to go to battle with against your arch rival when it's just 100% passion bleeding for the shirt?
I probably shouldn't speak for Daryl Grove on this one, but I'm going to go ahead and speak for Daryl Grove and say the answer is no. I don't want Timmy Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, some people say like, well, he starts in the Bundesliga, he's going to be good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't always translate. I mean, look, Alfredo Morales starts in the Bundesliga. Well, he struggles with time, but there was a time when he was starting regularly in the Bundesliga. And but meanwhile, he's not part of this team. I mean, they've been trying like since 2011 to get him involved with the team, and he's not there. So, you see, like, even when guys break in the first team in big league, it's a tricky process, because the U.S. team is not an all-star team. It's a team. It's not just, you choose like the most talented guys out there and just assume everyone's going to put the pins. No, it's formation, it's chemistry. There's a lot to it out there too. So, when you bring in these guys, like I said, it's they're not used to the setup. They're not used to the system. They never met these guys before. They never played any U23, U20 soccer. They never played MLS or growing up. College soccer, they're not completely unfamiliar with the environment. So, yeah, there's actually another level. I mean, there's due diligence. Do they want to be here? And can they fit in? Is the chemistry going to, like, all of a sudden just mesh? So it's really tricky with these dual nationals. I mean, look, it works sometimes. Fabian Johnson, I always think one of the struggling things with Klinsmann is that he uses his best player, most talented player, like Fabian Johnson, they use him to fill holes. They need a left back, so they put him back there. But that's not where he's best at. I mean, he's a midfielder. He's an attacker. That's where he played with Germany's U21 team that won the European Championship. So it's he's awesome talent, but they're using him because they put him in a place where there's just no other guys who can get the job done. So that's why you start seeing guys gradually start filtering out of the system when they're brought in, because it's really tough to get these guys in. There's no, like I said, Danny Williams, Timothy Chandler, Aaron Johansson, there's injuries. Yeah, but even before injuries, it was tough with him. There's various reasons why these guys, don't stick around. It's because it's very tough for many reasons.
So
it's not like being xenophobic or anti-American.
No,
American citizens, but the national team is there's a lot to it than that. No one's questioning their Americanness, but when you have a bunch of guys who've played together their whole lives, or at least familiar with guys their whole lives, and then you get a guy just coming in, out of the nowhere and might even struggle with the language at times, it's tough.
More from our chat with Brian in just a second, but first, a word from today's sponsor. So you mentioned the situation with Terrence Boyd. It sounds like that is similar to the situation with Corey Anton, the right back for the 16-year-old right back for FC Kaiserslautern 2. It sounds like he has a serviceman, I think a Marine dad, who he doesn't speak to anymore, didn't take his name, but now I guess wants to play for the U.S. national team. So I'm curious.
Well, of course. I mean, if Die Mannschaft is like too tough of a road to climb.
Yeah.
Then of course you're going to look at your next best option. It's like if you look at, for example, in basketball, Americans will go over there, and then they just naturalize them because, the best college basketball players who weren't good enough for the NBA are awesome compared to some of the foreign-born players. Not as much anymore, but for example, Cameron Carter-Vickers, his dad, Howard Carter, who I know. I've gotten to know over the years. His dad was, I think was drafted in the '84 NBA draft out of LSU. Right. He was the second leading all-time scorer next behind Pete Maravich. And, things didn't work out with the NBA. He had a drug problem, so he went abroad. And he went to the French League, and they gave him a passport within a year. And of course he was just going to play for France's national team. He's never going to play in the Olympics for the US. So yeah, his dad got an American. So it's now you got to look at Anton and you got to be like, okay, well, even if he fits the build and his talent individual is good, of course you want to call him up to a youth national team. I think they have, and you see, well, is this guy going to fit in? And the younger you do it, the better it is they're going to integrate. But of course, when the younger you call them in, who knows if they're going to be good in the future? Everyone thought Fabian Hertzler, because he was affiliated with Bayern Munich, was going to be awesome, and now he's out of the game. He played for Germany's youth national teams. So you got, if you bring them in when they're younger, then the familiarity is there, but then they have to bear the burden of any other young player, and when you go to the U16 level, for example, you're going to be looking at very few of those guys turn out to be pros over time. It's just the way it is in any sport when the younger you go.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. But I wanted to also ask, do you think, is there a, institution in place or framework in place that, so say Anton does want to get a U.S. passport, does want to play for the U.S. national team, are there people whose job it is solely to help him through the process of getting a passport or the process of making
I think they put him in touch with resources. There's legal, you can put him in touch with there's lawyers who do that. You don't need a staff to.
Okay, cool.
I think it'd be a waste of time just to have a staff that just goes out there and just finds dual nationals.
I put nothing past Jürgen Klinsmann.
Well, yeah. Well, what the thing is no other national team does it.
Yeah.
I think you look. It's the mark of a desperate program to do that. I think everyone would rather hire a really good youth coach and bring them stateside and teach our own players how to play like that, or work with guys who just retired from very good professional careers and teach them how to go from being good players, former players, to being good coaches and transfer that youth knowledge, transfer that knowledge that they have to young players and make them good coaches. I think that's a much better, because look, there's going to be guys like me or other people in the media who can go out and find these people. If you know about them, you just have to read your stuff or read my stuff or anything like that. And then, so therefore they don't need you know, a lot of times that's all you need to go out and do a staff. I mean, just pick up a paper and read, and then you read about some guy. Okay, you know, look, Cameron Carter-Vickers was just the perfect storm. I mean, they brought him in the right way at a very young age. The U18 team, you know, they helped him through getting a passport. They didn't know if it was possible at the time because they thought he might have waited too long, and it just happened to really work out. But you know, like I said, it's tough. But yeah, I don't think that they need. It just requires reading, having a pulse on the media, know the media, people who find these people. They're just making a phone call, and then if they're young, you know, just for eligible for a youth team, calling up to a meaningless camp and see how they are. There's no harm in doing that. That's Thomas Rongen, who found more of these guys than anybody. You know, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. That's how he really did it. You know, he didn't have a staff. I mean, but it doesn't really, you know, you just need an internet account really to find a lot of these guys.
That makes sense. and that's what I've used to find a lot of these guys, some of whom I emailed you about. I know we got to get you on the road here, but I wanted to ask you.
No, I can talk. It's always interesting. It's just fun to talk about how this is changing. And, you know, honestly, I think the fans' appetite for hunting down dual nationals it used to be a lot bigger than it was. Like I was saying, you know, it's kind of, we're growing up a little bit. And I think we're taking the Croatia approach, you know, like if we lose one or two of these guys, it's really, you know, not the end of the world if we can, you know. Christian Pulisic, like I said, came from with an arm. I mean, I know he went over to Dortmund at a young age, but I mean, he was a total prodigy when he played here before he joined Dortmund. I mean, a lot of people knew he was going to be very, very good. So, you know, if you can do that with one player, there's more Pulisic. Christian Pulisic is out there. The goal for this team, for the U.S. program, is to make it that not like such an anomaly. Is to have more of a pipeline of these kind of guys. And then you're talking, you know. And then who cares? I mean, if you could develop the strength of an overall football and culture and football and program is not what you can recruit. It's what you can develop.
So I'm curious then, like on the scale that you're talking about then, like where would a player like, say, Timothy Weah fit in, who is born in New York? I don't know how much soccer he played in the United States before moving abroad, has been with PSG since I guess he was 15 at least. Like in that situation, is he a person who you would say has come through the U.S. system, or is he kind of an outlier as well?
I mean, you know, it's, you know, you're talking about, you know, a known football family there, and look, sometimes there's dual nationals that develop in the United States and they don't get their citizenship till later. I mean, like Darlington Nagbe, you know, I mean, there's another guy whose dad was awesome as a player, but yeah, I mean, there's some guys who are just global, you know. They can be global products because they were born here, but then they have to travel a lot, and they just kind of grow up with their very unique situations. Yeah, I mean, he spent some time here, and I think the U.S. had their foot in the door the first, and you know, I don't necessarily put him as a hallmark of American development, but I mean, I don't really put him on as the hallmark of any other country's development either.
Okay, that makes sense. So then would a player who is, I don't think he's even a dual national, but then like a player like Eric Palmer-Brown would maybe be another kind of Pulisic-esque example where he's come through the academy system,
absolutely,
and then has moved.
It's a great example. I mean, he's a very gifted guy, player, and you just hope that, like, you know, the metatarsal injury, it doesn't, you know, you worry about, it's a scary injury because it has a tendency to recur over and over again.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's what ruined the career of Omar Salgado. But you know, I think he's a very gifted player. You know, and people scout the U.S. clubs scout the U.S. U18 and youth teams, and he stood out for them like a long time ago. And you know, and that's why there was legit interest from Juventus. I think going to Portugal with Porto is a better fit. I mean, there's more of a pathway to the first team. But yeah, I mean, Palmer Brown is very much a product of American soccer.
So then
and he kind of is like that Pulisic build, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there we go. Okay, gotcha there. That makes sense. So then my final question, I think, for you, with everything that you said, and it all makes total sense, but I still I have to ask, is there a player that, I sent you a couple different players that I was interested in. Is there a player out there that if they did start playing for the U.S. national team, you would be particularly excited to see, that you'd be excited that they did end up opting for the United States? Or is it all sort of, have you reached that point where it is sort of like, yeah, it's great, but whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more of like it's okay, whatever. I mean, it's. I mean, you look at the guys out there that are, that right now. I mean, I think like Timothy Tillman's kind of like probably probably the hottest rated one. I mean, look, another example would be the Parker brothers. I mean, how much? I mean, for a while you thought that Devontae and Sean were going to be just awesome. I mean, U.S. soccer was all over them. Now it's like if they decided to switch to the U.S. team, is there a spot for him? I mean, I don't think there's a spot for him. I mean, Sean Parker, who everyone thought was going to be great, is now coming off the bench for a 2 Bundesliga team. I mean, who cares? I think that if you want to talk about a guy who, if they play for the U.S. team, could help them right away, I think you would look domestically. I think Dom Dwyer is going to get his citizenship. And I don't think he's one for the future, but he's one that could help the U.S. team right now, especially, turn the page on Wando. And if Josie goes down with another injury because he's been hurt for so many major tournaments now in a row, it could give a guy. I mean, there's a guy who I don't think you would have to ask any chemistry issues. Everyone knows Dom Dwyer, and I only bring him up because I think he's closing in on his citizenship within a couple of months. So then you think like, okay, in the Hex, what happens if Josie goes down and Wando's struggling to score? Aaron Johansson is not playing at all. And then, of course, you got Bobby Wood there. But then, what else? I mean, Terrence Boyd is not playing a lick, and he's so far down the depth chart at Leipzig. So then maybe, Dwyer's a guy who's probably, it's not sexy. It's not attached to a good club. But there's a dual national, soon to be dual national, I think could help the U.S. team like right now in a pinch.
Yeah, see,
okay. I think there's a huge value in that.
I like that idea that it needs to be like a practical approach of like who can actually help the team right now versus who's this like exciting 12-year-old who can dribble the ball really well and has 12 different nationalities. Like I like that idea of it being more about like what's going to help you and the program right now and what fits with the program right now. I
mean, look, Dom Dwyer, I think this country made him who he is as a soccer player. In terms of loyalty, I don't think he would hesitate. I think he would love to play against England and stick it to him. I mean, I've talked to him before, and he's is he the most technical player? No. I mean, is he a guy who can? I mean, how many other Americans can score between 16 and 20 goals a year in Major League Soccer? I mean, is he? Like I said, you have Bobby Wood, Jordan Morris. But then, like I said, if Josie goes down to another injury, then there's everyone else has questions. I mean, is Clint Dempsey ever going to return again? I don't know. I'm not a heart doctor, but I like the guys who are, I think that there's a huge value sometimes to finding guys who are, who could step in right now, and that the chemistry would be fine with a guy like that. I mean, like Matt Beasler, Graham Zusi, Benny Feilhaber, they all play with them, and then countless other guys play against them. So I think that there's always you got to look at you got to look at things like that too. I think that would be an interesting discussion. I mean, in terms of like, I think that's a guy that. Certainly, I think you're going to see soon on the national team. I mean, if he's not playing in the Hex, I think he can play in the Gold Cup when the U.S. team is going to need a lot of depth.
All right. Well, Brian, I really appreciate all that insight, as do I'm sure our listeners. If they want to read more from you, hear more from you, where can they go?
Well, you go to American Soccer. Follow me on Twitter. American Soccer Now. Follow me on Twitter. I'm in Howler, just about every issue too. So I'm around.
There we go.
Hard to find.
Beautiful. Well, Brian, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
So thank you again to Brian for coming on the show. Lots of great insight there, including the fact that I'm excited to see Dom Dwyer suit up in a U.S. men's national team jersey and score in the 2018 World Cup. I'm pretty sure that's what Brian just guaranteed. I could be wrong. Until the 2018 World Cup, you can content yourself with more episodes from the Total Soccer Show. Next week, Daryl Grove is still out of town. I think he will be back for a couple Skype episodes, and then we'll have some more interviews to balance that out. You can also check out The Goalmouth, the podcast that we've been doing with Howler Magazine and Dirty Tackle. It's a short 3 to 6 minute podcast. It's the bite-sized soccer news of the day. If you haven't yet heard that show, we're going to include one episode, the episode I did from today, at the end of this show, just so you can get an idea what Goalmouth is all about. If you like it, then you can subscribe. If not, then I blame Daryl. And with that, here's the Goalmouth. Good morning, beautiful people. It's Thursday, October 27th. I'm Taylor Rockwell, and you are listening to The Goalmouth, a podcast collaboration between Dirty Tackle, Howler Magazine, and the Total Soccer Show. On yesterday's program, George told you about some robot-on-robot action in the world of soccer. I would just like to be the first of the Goalmouth crew to say all hail our new robot soccer overlords, even if they are, as Mr. Qureshi put it, more similar to drunk toddlers than they are magisterial Messis. On today's menu of bite-sized soccer news, the NASL assures you that the NASL is doing just fine, according to the NASL. Didier Drogba is either injured, petty, or just really hates traveling to Washington. Pep Guardiola laments while Jose Mourinho apologizes. Tottenham might be permanently opting for Uber XL, and Julian Green rules the world, according to U.S. soccer fans. Up first, on Tuesday, the Tampa Bay Rowdies and the Ottawa Fury announced that they would be departing the North American Soccer League for the apparently greener pastures of the United Soccer League. This dual defection represents the latest in a recent string of blows to the body of the nation's second-tier professional league. It already had to deal with the loss of Minnesota United to MLS, and rumors abound that the Carolina Railhawks might switch to the USL as well. There's also uncertainty regarding the financial future of both Rayo OKC and the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. So, if all goes wrong, the NASL could be looking at a 2017 season with fewer than 10 teams. However, the NASL is not worried. In an official statement, the league announced, quote, "We have ambitious plans for growth, and we're proud that the flexibility of the NASL model remains an extremely attractive proposition for investors seeking to become part of an authentic, competitive soccer league," end quote. While rosy in sentiment, that quote definitely sounds a bit like the captain of the Titanic saying, "Sure, we hit an iceberg, but we're excited for the future of this ship and can't wait to see what other routes might open up once we make it to New York." Things aren't looking that much brighter for one MLS franchise. The Montreal Impact are still having problems convincing Didier Drogba to actually play for them, regardless of the seemingly important fact that he is legally obligated to do so. Despite recent drama concerning Drogba's status as a substitute/refusal to play, many pundits assumed he would be ready to go once his team kicked off against DC United in the MLS playoffs. Those pundits were proven wrong when Montreal-based journalist Patrick Friolet confirmed via Twitter that the Ivorian international did not travel with his team to Washington. While many have been quick to pile on the criticism for the Chelsea legend, it is worth noting that Montreal coach Mauro Biello confirmed earlier in the week that 1. Drogba still had a bad back, 2. had not taken part in training, and 3. was very unlikely to play against DC. Whether or not that's an attempt to slap some happy paint on a negative situation remains unclear. I prefer to think that Drogba, much like many American voters, is just sick and tired of Washington, D.C. and wanted to avoid the city at all costs. Or maybe he's just had one too many run-ins with the ever-present traffic on I-95 and, like many frustrated commuters before him, just couldn't deal with it anymore. Who really knows? Pep Guardiola's, I assume, misery at having to pay attention to the English Football League Cup was compounded when his Manchester City side fell 1-0 to their crosstown rivals Manchester United. In news that was first noted by Opta Joe and then stolen by basically every pundit everywhere on Earth, the loss marks the first time in Guardiola's career that he has failed to win in 6 games, and is also the first time City haven't had a shot on target in a game since April of 2012. With that in mind, I'm excited to see what new thing Guardiola bans Man City players from using this week. It's already been pizza and Wi-Fi, so here's hoping that there's an obscure betting website out there somewhere where you can place a wager on what random thing will next suffer Guardiola's wrath. For Manchester United and Jose Mourinho, the victory comes at an ideal time, and was perhaps slightly more palatable for fans than that 4-0 humiliation dished out by Chelsea earlier in the week. After the match, Mourinho was shown apologizing to United fans, and promised that the Red Devils would continue to perform well in the competitions that no one cares that much about. I mean, who needs the Premier League when you can potentially win the meaningless cup double? Staying in England, Tottenham are reportedly in talks with Uber over the naming rights to the club's new stadium. The deal, which is rumored to be in the neighborhood of £20 million a year, comes at a time when Uber is losing market share to taxi app competitor Lyft, who are aggressively attempting to make up physical ground on their larger competitor. So don't be surprised when Arsenal suddenly gets a £25 million offer from Lyft whenever the naming rights at the Emirates become available. Lastly, it's been a good week for Americans playing in Germany. Bobby Wood got a brace for Hamburg in their DFB Pokal match, and Fabian Johnson got on the score sheet for his German club, aka Borussia Mönchengladbach, as well. John Brooks and Hertha Berlin kept a clean sheet, and Christian Pulisic knocked home the late equalizer in Borussia Dortmund's dramatic 3-3 Bundesliga draw with Ingolstadt. And then came the news that Julian Green not only got his first competitive start for Bayern Munich in their DFB Pokal match against Augsburg, but also scored in that 3-1 victory. The goal, a well-taken glancing header, means that Julian Green is now the only American to ever score for Bayern Munich. Meanwhile, somewhere in Southern California, Jurgen Klinsmann nodded approvingly while quietly saying the words intensity and nastiness to himself over and over again. That's it for today's Goalmouth. You can explore all of these stories in more depth by subscribing to our newsletter. The link is in the show notes. I've been Taylor Rockwell. You are getting a double dose of Ryan Bailey this week. He was with you on Tuesday. He'll be with you tomorrow. And I like to think that he's always with all of us in our hearts. And on that note, I'll leave you with today's Goalmouth top tip. If your ship might be sinking, a defiant press release probably won't plug the hole.